friends, this is Trish, and welcome to Teacher Therapy. Today we have a very special guest named Mr. Postman, and he's going to be anonymous today because he is currently still teaching in the classroom, and he is at something called a non-public school, and that concept is pretty new to me, so I'm just going to have him explain to you what that is in case you haven't heard of it.
Yeah, so a non-public school is the school where the quote unquote bad kids go. So when a public school has a very troubled student and they've reached so many expulsions, they've been in fights, they've been doing drugs, maybe they are in a gang, maybe there's all these endless situations of why a student ends up in an NPS, but specifically in California, we have NPSs because when a student has kind of reached that limit of this guy is causing so many problems, there's only so much we can do. Maybe we need to find a different environment for them because their behavior is just such a difficult thing for us to manage. They're going to send that child to an NPS. And part of that is because every kid is offered a free access to public education. And doesn't matter if the kid comes to your school and fights 10 other guys. It doesn't matter. That kid has legal right to a free public education. So in NPS, that's where we step in and we take the quote unquote, bad kids. And that's where I'm working right now.
And so that almost sounds to me kind of like an alternative school. So is
Yeah.
it like that, or what's the difference?
I would think that would be the easiest way to reference it if you're thinking about it in that terms. An alternative school. The difference is in alternative school, there can be more like say someone who's on probation, or say someone who, it can be much more extreme for an alternative school. I think NPS is much more like, here's your second chance. We want you to come back to public education, but at this point, you need a different environment because it's not helping the public education for whatever school, because we have at least 6 to 7 districts that send kids to us. So it's not like we're working with one district, we're working with multiple districts because the need for one spot where you can bring in different kids and make it work. That's kind of where we come in to help out and facilitate. So we have had success where we have kids that they get sent to us and they see the other kids around them and they go, you know what? I don't want to be, I don't want to get stuck here. I don't want to be here because I'm not that bad of a kid, quote unquote, thinking of in those terms. So they end up going back to public school, and we have success stories because my job is, at the end of the day, my job at this school is to get kids back to public school. And we think about that, we take it for granted, but there are kids that, they do need a second chance. They do need to realize, okay, I can't go around lashing out at people when I'm upset. I need to learn to control my behavior, my anger, whatever it is, and they end up going back to public school. But the rate of return is pretty small, unfortunately, and that speaks to a larger issue. But we can get into that a little bit later.
Okay. And so does a student need some kind of diagnosis to get sent to this school, or is it a combination of people with, say, like autism or emotional disturbance mixed in with behavioral issues that aren't considered a result of, a diagnosis?
Yeah, so all of our school, we only accept a special ed diagnosis, whether or sorry, a disability diagnosis. So we have the severe side, as we quote unquote use that word, because that is someone who, say, they have very on the spectrum of autism, they're very low functioning, or however we can say that more politically correct, but someone who, they're nonverbal, they're not talking, they're not able to write their name, they can only do a little bit of work, but their behaviors, because of their diagnosis, because of their disability, is very extreme for a classroom. So those kids, they need access to public education. And are they going to benefit being in a district public school that doesn't harm other kids? Probably not. That's why they're being sent to us, because maybe they tore up the classroom, they threw desks everywhere, and they were doing something even crazy, like they're taking off their clothes, or whatever element involved. They get sent to us, and we provide a space for them. So those kids, they're not the kids. Those are the kids I like working with. But the kids that I am working with right now, they're the emotionally disturbed side of things. So, say a kid gets diagnosed with OHI, which is an umbrella term for you could have, the common thing we're seeing now is OHI turns into ADD,
What's OHI stand for?
other health impairment.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of this loose term that special ed has taken in, and they've been able to kind of throw it around a little bit. So what we're seeing is we're seeing this uptick in kids being diagnosed and put into special education. Well, that's because the diagnostic process is becoming loosened to the point where someone who has ADD, well, now they get special education. So someone who has, it could be even simple, it can be even more simple, which not simple, that's not the right term, but specifically like emotionally disturbed. So when someone gets termed emotionally disturbed as a, say they're 8 years old, say they're 10 years old. I'm working with middle school. I'm working with 12-year-olds to 13-year-olds primarily right now, and they get termed with an emotionally disturbed diagnosis. That can be anything. I mean, if your parent hit you, if you lost a relative, if maybe you're genetically predisposed to depression or anxiety. I mean, it's such a broad term. And I'm not saying it shouldn't exist. I think it should, but we're going to turn the whole country into a special ed diagnosis, and we don't have enough special ed teachers. So that's why we're seeing this pushback where public teachers are now taking in so many kids with IEPs and 504s, and it's because the bureaucracy of education is growing. And now you have the aftermath of it, which is if a parent thinks that special education will get their kid a better education or more things, like Burger King, have it your way. If they can get their kid to be diagnosed into a special ed placement, they feel like they're going to help their kid. But it really doesn't. It hinders a lot of students.
That's helpful because I have an idea of some of the behaviors that you've experienced, and we're going to talk about that more. But one of my first questions was, are kids with really serious behavior issues just being labeled as something so they could be moved someplace else? And so that's what I was wondering. So your answer kind of helped me about what I was suspecting.
Yes, I think it's both. Honestly, I think it's both. That one, there are more behaviors, and two, we have the more umbrella terms in special education where you can diagnose a kid who's, I've seen diagnoses for kids' behaviors like he doesn't want to do his work and he pushes away his work, or he talks back, and it's like, okay, well, is this someone who's emotionally disturbed, or is this a kid that doesn't? Maybe he's been on his iPad since he's been 4 years old, and now all of a sudden he's not interested in education. So that's the slippery slope that I see special ed going down recently, and I think it's going to get much worse before it gets better, because special education teachers, we want to work with people with disabilities, but we also don't want to be gaslit into believing that every kid that's being pushed into our room has this crippling disability, or this disability that's taken away from their education, rather than it's just, look, this kid was never taught to raise his hand. He was never taught to not talk back to an adult. He was, these things where it's like, where is the line? The line is so blurred right now. It worries me, because if special education becomes so irrelevant, we will no longer have it. And the people who need it the most will no longer have access to it. And I do feel like that's where we're headed. I'm not saying tomorrow, but if you keep this trend, 10 years from now, that might be an argument that who knows wherever's making, and we'll just get rid of special education. So it worries me a little bit, but I also think it's real. I think there's a lot of kids who are having emotionally disturbed upbringings. And I think it's rising because there are so many broken homes.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. I remember even back between 2013 and 2021, we started hearing about ODD, which is oppositional defiant disorder. And I was like, in my day, that was just an undisciplined kid that needed some consequences. And so I could kind
Yeah.
of see the ball rolling, but I think it's probably gotten way worse even since then.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It's funny because when you hear it, if you're the average person, average person who's never dealt with anyone with disabilities, or you've never been in that kind of classroom, the oppositional defiant disorder, I thought was a joke. And I'm with you. I did get a student who was labeled with oppositional defiant disorder, and I don't know if I could put it any other way. If you told him that he could have a snack, he would not want a snack. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was ready to defy you on whatever it was. It didn't matter if it was good or bad for him. It was that you're telling him as an adult, and he's gonna fight you on it. Doesn't matter what it is. So I remember having that epiphany of like, wow, this is actually a real thing. I did not think this was real. But also, to your point, I think that's a term that's another umbrella term that can be put on a kid, and maybe they just don't have manners. Maybe they weren't raised by two parents or by their parents. I have so many, most of my students, either they have one parent or they're in a foster home. So it's like, of course this is going to impact how a kid comes to school. Like, if your home environment is not safe, why would they care about algebra? you know like, if they're worried about how much food they're going to eat and who's going to tuck them in at night and who cares about them, they're not going to show up into a classroom and all of a sudden want to learn about earth science, or the rivers, or anything you're trying to teach them. And so I don't fault the kids that I know have been through a lot. I don't fault them at all. I have so much leniency towards them, which is one of the positives about being in this kind of environment, because the administrators, they all know what kind of kids you're working with. They've all taught these type of kids. They're behind you 100%. So that's the one positive, like one of the positives.
So let's go ahead and start talking about, what do you see on a day-to-day basis? Walk us through a day in the life of your job.
There's decent days and there's rough days. But so on average, an average day, you're gonna have kids call you the B word. You're gonna have kids tell you to F off and walk out the door. You're gonna have kids try to fight each other on everything, which is, it could be the smallest thing. It could be a kid playing football. They're playing around two-hand touch football, and it could turn into, I'm going to kick your what, and I'm ready to fight you. And now we have to all move in and make sure these kids aren't going at each other, because you really don't know if a kid is going to punch another kid in the face, or if they're going to grab some sort of object, whether it's a rock or a desk, and throw it at a kid. So on average, you just realize, you're kind of like a probation officer. You just have to watch your back. Not that the kids are violent towards staff. That's actually one of the things that's interesting about this population, is most of the kids, they're not going to hit staff. They're not going to throw things at you, but it's the willingness to attack other students and peers at any moment that makes you as a staff on edge, because at the end of the day, you're entrusted with the safety of these kids. So if you can't have scissors out. I've had my computer broken. I've had my classroom absolutely destroyed at least 4 times this school year. Like, holes in the wall because desks were thrown into them, and like every little thing I had on my table was on the ground and thrown. And so that can happen. Other things that we witness are, obviously the physical fights. Students want to fight each other. Everything. These kids want to fight over everything. You called them, a little butt sniffer, like a dumb term, like something so stupid that in our days, if we got called that, I'd be like, well, yeah, whatever, blah blah blah. But these kids are like, okay, yeah, you want to say that? I'm ready to punch you in the face, and I'm ready to start bleeding over this. We also have kids that run away from campus, so they hop the gate and they are out on the street, and we can't legally grab them or stop them because unless they're in an immediate danger to themselves or to somebody else, we aren't legally allowed to restrain a student. I've had parents ask me like, why don't you just grab them? Why don't you just wrap them up? And in an IEP meeting, and we're like, yeah, we're not allowed to do that. Because especially in California where everybody's so sue happy, it's like, no, like we're not allowed to do whatever we want just because a kid's acting bad. So other things that have gone on a weekly basis is we had people sneaking in vape pens, weed pens, I should say. So kids, we had an elementary kid, 8 years old, smoking a weed pen because some high schooler brought it in, and I mean these kids have no bound. The idea of age does not exist to these kids. And when you think about it on a deep psychological level, when a kid has been so traumatized, it doesn't matter that they're 8. They feel 18, in their mind. And I know that's weird to say, but some of these kids have been so, I've known, we had one student and he was only there for about a month, which is bad. If you get kicked out of an NPS, you are another level of what you're trying to do. And it's a really sad story. He was put in foster care at a young age. He was kind of thrown around where in terms of like you go to this foster house, you go to this foster house, all these things, and passed around like 7 or 8 times. He just turned 13. Then he ends up back at his mom's house, and it's like he doesn't trust his mom because his mom is the one who put him in foster care. And now he's showing up to a class where no one could build a relationship with him. I mean, his walls were so high, and his behavior, it all stemmed back to that. I mean, it was just so obvious. Like, why would he want to trust an adult when he's never had an adult to trust? So anyways, he was trying to fight everybody. I mean, if you called him a silly goose, he was going to fight you. He was going to hunt you down and want to beat the living, what out of you. And if he didn't get his way, he was going to break every window, throw a rock in every window. He would go to our transportation vans, throw rocks at those, break glass and break windows, and police would show up. And it's like, we have to call the cops on a 13-year-old kid. This is sad. But at the end of the day, it's like we don't, as a society, we don't have good alternatives to what we're dealing with some of these kids.
Wow.
But yeah, so there's a lot of mental draining stuff when you're dealing with these kids, because at the end of the day, nobody wants to see a 12-year-old suffering. Nobody wants to see a 12-year-old come from a broken home, or have nobody in his family that cares about him, or all these things that these kids bring into a classroom. And that can be draining, because you can have all the compassion in the world. When a kid tears up your classroom, 5 days in a row, you become bitter. You want to blame them, but you have to keep bringing yourself back. This is a 12-year-old kid. At the end of the day, their behaviors are not acceptable. I'm not saying that, but why should they care? If they're so traumatized and there's so many things in their life that are going wrong, why should they care? I'm impressed by the kids that do, like the kids that are able to rise up above it. I mean, those are the kids I find, and I'm just like, come on, go, 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 don't stop.
So I'm curious, what is the philosophy that your school has to, for a lack of better terms, reform the students? Like what kind of professional developments do they give you guys? What do they teach you guys in terms of like discipline, classroom management? I would not even know where to begin in a situation like that.
I'm laughing because all these teacher terms, I got my master's 3 years ago or 2 years ago, and all the teacher terms they put on in those classes, none of it applies. None of it applies. At the end of the day, you have to rely so much on building a genuine connection with these students. They can smell BS, from a mile away. If you're faking it, if you're not there, if you don't care, if you're just there trying to get a paycheck, blah blah, blah, they will call you out so fast. I mean, these kids are brutal. in a loving, almost in a loving way. Like, imagine a kid that's seen all that fakeness from whether it's foster parents or what, going through that kind of system. So they will call you out right away. So you better genuinely care about these kids, even when they spit on you or call you that, you're a B word and all these things. You got to just suck it up. I mean, I feel like my whole body is made of calluses now because it's so rough. My skin is so rough. It's so thick now because nothing bothers me now. Like, kids will say or do something, and I'm just kind of like, "Why'd you do that? What are you doing?" So as far as policies though, the main thing is to see if they want to change, because we have kids that don't want to change. They will come to an NPS when they're 10 years old, and they will graduate from an NPS when they're 18 or 19, depending on how many credits they're doing and how hard they're trying. I like being a middle school teacher because at this level I can tell those kids, like, you literally have two paths. You can go this way or you can go this way, and it's your decision. And the kids that get it and they can think about their future in a way that they can care about enough, they think about, they're like, "Yeah, I don't want to be here for 8 years. I don't want to be here for 6 years." And I try to remind them. So that's my classroom management, which is not something you could do in public school, obviously. So it's something I have to rely on, because at the end of the day, if the kid doesn't care because their home environment is so bad, then it doesn't matter what you do in the classroom. It doesn't matter what you teach. It doesn't matter how many dance tricks you do to get them to pay attention. It doesn't matter how kind you are to them. If a kid doesn't care, they don't care. And I'm at the point where I can kind of sniff it out, where I meet a kid and I talking to them and I try to get to know them on a deeper level, and I can kind of tell, like, okay, he's not there yet, or she's not there yet. She doesn't care. And maybe in 3 years she'll mature and something will click and she'll go, "You know what? I deserve better. I'm not going to stay here." But as far as classroom management, the main thing that our schools rely on, like NPS, is snacks. Here, please don't talk so inappropriately. Don't swear so much. Don't destroy the classroom. Don't fight each other. Don't try to do some schoolwork. Try to pay attention. Don't interrupt me every 2 seconds. And here's a bag of Takis. Like that. That's literally all we have, because at the end of the day, these kids are here for a reason. So we accepted them. Our school, we accepted them. We knew they have bad behaviors. So we can't do the traditional things of, okay, we're just going to expel them, and then we'll just find somewhere to throw them to. We can't do that unless the kid is really a danger to other students or a danger to staff. That's the only options where we can actually get a kid moved out, or figure out that he can't be here anymore, where we can legally say that. So with that in mind, I have a lot of leniency. I remember hearing your other guest. It was the one about China. He taught in China, and his comment was something about, teachers in America are basically social workers with a credential. And when he said that, I laughed, because I was like, that's so true. I'm a social worker. At the end of the day, the job I'm doing, I'm a social worker. I'm trying to facilitate some conversation about mental illness, where I can kind of understand what's happening in their life, to a point where I can have compassion, to the point where, I don't grade very hard. I give them very simple stuff, like, just try. That's what I tell students. If you want an A+ in my class, try. That's it. You don't have to know the right answers. You don't have to spell properly. You don't have to read very well. If you're trying, you get an A+ in my class, because these kids are so deprived of positive comments in their life that I don't need to be another person in their life adding on to negativity. I don't need to be sitting there adding more negativity, like, "Oh, you spelled this word wrong. Oh, you didn't do this properly." It's more of like, if this kid is trying and he's making some progress, here you go. Here's your A+. Take that home to your foster parent. Take that home to your, whether it's your single mom or a single dad or whatever. Here's some positivity. You need that. And so many of these kids if you make one negative comment, I mean, they will remember. I've had kids bring up something I said to them 4 months ago, and it was the smallest little thing, but it had an etch of negativity in it, and they remember it. And it's something you have to be, as a teacher in this environment, you have to be so conscious of, because their brains are so ready for negativity. That's what they live in, and that's what they receive, and that's what they want to hear. So it's tough. There's no traditional policies.
And I guess that does make sense that traditional punitive consequences wouldn't work well in that environment. I guess I wonder, does the environment with a lot of positivity help them to eventually self regulate better, where they get in control of their behavior? Because I'm all about what works. If
Right.
positive reinforcement works, I'm all in. I just wonder like how much it actually works over time.
Yeah, no, I totally hear what you're saying. I do think there is a balance. You do have to be negative sometimes. Like the first thing is, if you're working in this environment, my first thing is when I get a new student, I'm spending the next month trying to know the student on a deeper level. And I want to know, what's their home life? Do they have brothers, sisters? Do they what kind of favorite movie do they like? Do they I have and I get it. Most teachers are trying to do that. I'm very fortunate that I'm only legally allowed to have 13 students in my class. And sometimes because of behaviors, kids get kicked out, and I only have 8, 9, 10 students in my class. So I actually have an opportunity to get on a deep level with these kids, where I know what makes them tick. What are things they're actually interested in? What are things that bother them? What are things that are going on in their home life? Because if I don't have that information, it doesn't matter if I tell them, "Oh, good job on writing this," or "Good job on answering that question," because I'm just another adult spewing, for lack of a better word, bull at them. They've been in foster care. They've had a dad or a mom that left them or abandoned them. It's like, why? You're just another adult spewing stuff. You don't even know me. You'll have kids tell you that. You'll have an 11-year-old kid tell you that you don't even know me, and you're thinking, dang. I mean, you're 11 years old, but that's a profound thing to say, that you're 11 and you can tell if somebody knows you or doesn't know you. So there's a deep consciousness to a lot of these kids that is it's sad. I'm not gonna lie. There's a sadness to it that's very difficult as a teacher and educator to navigate sometimes. But if I'm able to, and I try to with each student to navigate it, that's where I can be a human being to them. That's where my positive reinforcement, or if I'm giving them negative consequences, that's it. All pivots off of if I've connected with them on a human level, where they go, you know what, Mr. You know who is he's got my back. Even though he's telling me that I messed up, or he's telling me I did something wrong, or he needs me to chill out for a second, or whatever it may be, he's got my back. I know he actually cares about me. So you have to reach that level with them, or you can't have any success. Doesn't matter. And that's where I found where I want to be positive with them, but I also want to be real with them. It's like, dude, you just destroyed my classroom. You took that out on me. And I explained it to him. You took that out on me because now that's my classroom. That's not the student you were mad at, or whoever you were mad at. You took it out on me. And you have these moments of humanity where you explain to them their actions are affecting people in so many ways, and they kind of are able to take it as a little kid. Imagine you're 11 years old and you're like, oh yeah, I guess I did affect you, even though I wanted to hurt this other person. And those are the moments I rely on, because if I don't have those moments, there's no redemption arc for some of these kids. I've got two kids right now, two students. I'm sorry, I say kids. They're my kids, quote unquote. But two students right now that have worked really hard this school year to go back to public school, and it's been the reason I show up. I'm literally there's been days where I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And I show up, and there's these two students that are just they're there to demand that they're demanding that they deserve better than being in a classroom where you can barely talk, you can barely get a lesson done, you can barely make a point, because of all these other students. And there and I've told them over and over, look, you have to demand better for yourself. You have to demand it. I can't do that. I can't show up for you. I can advocate for you. I can tell you, look, I believe in you, blah, 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 blah. But if you don't, it does not matter. And I'm just really proud of them because I do believe they're going to be going back to public school at the end of the school year. They're going to go next school year. They're going to end up back in public school. And it's been, for these two kids, I think they've been in an NPS for at least 4 or 5 years. So those are the things that keep me going.
Well, that's really inspiring. It sounds like the kids are really lucky to have you as their teacher. That's amazing.
I try.
So let's chat about the parents. What's it
Yeah.
like dealing with parents? Are they supportive? Are they helpful? Are they understanding? What happens with parents?
So you know what? It's such a hit or miss with this school, with these type of schools, NPS. You will have a parent that's like 100% on board. They're like, yeah, I know. My student is, yep, he does this, he does that, and da, 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 da. I don't know what to do. And I hope you guys are doing a good job, and they're so supportive. And I'm lucky when I have those, I can tell the student's behavior because it actually gives me leverage as a teacher. If I can tell the student, look, I'm going to call your mom or your dad today, and I'm going to tell them you're doing this, and they go, oh, okay, don't do that. I don't want you to call. I don't want you to do that. Like, that's the only leverage I have because I don't have any other. Especially, we're not in a public school. I don't have those typical consequences you can do. Go to the principal's office, or we're going to expel you, or we're going to. So if I don't have a parent that's 100% on board, I have nothing, literally, and it happens. So it's good when I have a parent 100% on board, but there are times where maybe you're dealing with a single mom, you're dealing with a single dad, you're dealing with a foster home, and if the relationship with that parent is not very good with the student, your job becomes kind of difficult because we have parents that sometimes you'll get a parent that's ready to defend their kid. I had one parent who, I don't mean to laugh, but I mean, the kid, this is one of the kids that I talked about earlier, he was a new student. He was destroying the classroom. He was ready to fight everybody and anybody. And the parent, I remember we had to have the parent come pick him up because he didn't want to get on his transportation to go home. He was breaking car windows. He was ready to attack a specific student. So we had to call 911. So we had cops have to show up. He had made everyone in my class want to fight him because he could not make friends. I mean, that was one of his issues because of his background. And anyways, so the mom showed up and she basically told us to like hush. I want my child to tell me what happened. And he starts telling the story, and he's leaving out this detail, and he's leaving out this, and he's not mentioning that. And we have there's 4 adults standing next to the parent and the student, and she wants to hear her son's opinion about what had transpired. And she knows, I mean, we've been calling her and texting her and sending her all this information of what he's been doing all day. So it's not like she didn't have an idea of the craziness that he was getting into. But I was just kind of like, is this really happening? Are we really stopping what we're trying to tell the parent so the student, this 12-year-old kid, can fabricate to his mom? Because nobody wants to tell their mom that they were doing bad. Nobody. So it was just kind of shocking, when you get a parent like that, where you're like, they are so delusional to the point where the kid has manipulated the parent so well that they've convinced them that, yeah, I might listen to you at home, and then you come to school and you do all this stuff, and now the parent thinks, oh, well, my kid listens to me at home when I tell him, hey, you better effing move this thing, and I'm going to hurt you if you don't, type of thing. And they listen. Well, of course, because you're a parent. And if you're using that kind of physical intimidation, yeah, I'm sure you're going to get a kid to listen to you. So that's pretty shocking. And I've had that with a handful of parents. Luckily, most of my parents they're 100% on board. I can call them, I can text them and be like, hey, can you help with this? This is what your student's doing. And if you could talk to them, I've tried to talk to them. And I'm fortunate that I have enough parents on board that are like, yes, let's let's correct this behavior.
That's really good to hear. So I'm curious about the school. Do I feel like in regular public school, there's tons of pressure for like data and testing and like maniacally tracking metrics to show improvement. Do you have less of that in your school, or does it just look a little bit different?
Yeah, so I think for our school, our main thing is behavior tracking. So we definitely want to track behavior because that's our main concern at the end of the day. The academic portion of it, I will say if it wasn't lenient, where it's like, I'll be honest, we're not tracking like a public school is tracking on the academics because we're dealing with so many behaviors. I mean, it's funny because have you ever been on the Reddit, teachers Reddit? So I'll go on there and I'll read these stories of like, oh, I had this one kid who, and they'll tell a story, and I'm just like, that's dang. I mean, I get it. I get why you would be frustrated with that, but I think about that and I'm like, compared to my class, I'm like, yeah, I'm very lucky if I teach 30 to 40% of the day. The rest of it is managing behaviors, managing mental outbursts, managing emotional things that are going on. I'm dealing with so many things that are beyond teaching them how to read, write, and use arithmetic that you kind of have to accept. You kind of have to accept. And that's the sad part. And that's why I related to that comment about, social worker. We're social workers with credentials because in this environment, you really are. You really are just a social worker. You're trying to get these kids to believe in themselves in a way that they've never heard an adult speak to them in that way. They've come in with these negative prescripts in their mind about who they are and how bad they are and how undeserving they are and nobody loves them and people will leave them and they have all these negativities that are just wired in their brain and they're 11 years old, they're 12 years old, and your job is to let them realize that that's not true. That's not true. So that takes away. But yeah, as far as the data goes, most of it's just behaviors. How many times are they breaking things? How many times are they cussing? How many times are they fighting other students? How many times are they running away from the campus? How many? So that's what we need to track because at the end of the day, we have to send that to the district, and the district has to decide. Is this kid improving? Should we try to think about bringing them back to public school? Because that's the main goal. The goal is to get them back to public school. Because this is the one thing I wanted to touch on is the NPS system is so vital to the districts, but the funding and the consistency of the product, I should say, product is unreliable. The funding it's just not good because we're getting funding from the district. So when a district sends a student, we get the funding for that student at our school. And that becomes this little complicated for-profit type of thing where at the end of the day, the owners of this NPS, they're trying to make money and they're trying to keep the doors open. And you got kids breaking windows and you got kids breaking this and you got kids destroying that. And I just think this system would succeed so much better. And I think it's going to be important going forward in public education in the US because of all these behaviors we're seeing is you need to have the NPS become part of the public education funding. Like an NPS should be its own thing. It should be part of the tax bracket or of what's being distributed. And without it, if an NPS lasts for 5 or 7 years, that's a very statistically good thing because they don't last because it's so difficult. But the public education relies so heavily on us. The public education system, if they didn't have us, the public education system would be so screwed because they cannot deny a kid education. They have to keep those kids in the school, and that becomes the dilemma. So without us, I mean, you would have some of the worst classes possible because of one student derailing 35 kids. That's insane. So
It's interesting that I've never heard of this. I'm kind of curious do you know, is an NPS, is that nationwide? Because I never heard of it in the Midwest where I live. I have heard of alternative school though, but it sounds like it's different.
outside of California, it might be a different tier. I'm thinking in California, it's because we have so what public schools have started doing is doing these behavior step downs. So like say a kid is having a behavior issue in this art class or whatever. So they have this one specific tier that the kid gets sent down to, and it's still on the campus, but it's specifically designed for students that are just causing problems in classroom, and they go there. And if there's other issues going on there, the next tier is we're going to send you to an NPS, which is kind of like you said, it is kind of like an alternative school. That's how we function to an extent. Once you get sent to the alternative school, because that's the way we can keep providing you access to education, to public education. If you get sent there, the tier after an NPS is, I forget the actual legal phrase of it, but it's basically like you live there, you do school there, you don't get visitations, it's almost like a jail type of thing. That's below us. And that happens to some students as well, where they're committing crimes, they're getting involved in gangs, they're hurting people, and they get sent there. So I think in the Midwest, instead of that tier, there's less tiers, which makes sense because some of the Midwest is not funded very well. Fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to look at it, but it would make more sense that it's like public education straight into an alternative school, because those are the only options. And like I said, an NPS in California, it's profitable if you want to really think about it that way, but at the same time it's not, because you're constantly cycling through students, you're constantly windows broken, liabilities, the staff is exhausted. I mean, I'm a teacher, but we have staff that are they getting paid the best money in the world to deal with this type of behaviors and threats and all this? No, they're not. They're not getting paid very well. And that's another issue that I have, which is districts in California, you get moved up through the system, you can make decent money, comparatively in California. But if you're at an NPS, it's kind of a whatever they can pay, whatever they can make work. So that's my main issue with the NPS system.
So I'm curious a little bit more about your school and the admin. I felt like in traditional school, like there was like tons of observation and tons of pressure and just tons of unrealistic expectations. It kind of sounds like you don't have that part. Is that true, or how does that work?
That is true. And that is actually the only way you would survive in this school as a teacher. Because if you had the top-down admin coming after you on every little mistake you make or every little comment that isn't perfectly said or whatever it is, I mean, I would quit. I would quit right away, because I'm dealing with so much from these students that if I have an adult breathing down my neck, I will throw the papers in their face and say, "See you later," because I'm not going to deal with this. And they know that. And that's what I was telling you. The NPS system, that's one positive, where they allow you to be a human and a teacher. They allow you to show up the best way you can for these kids, provide the best lessons that you can, and do the best you can. And they know that there's going to be days where a kid is destroying your classroom and you didn't get to teach this subject. And it is what it is, because we're at the end of the day, we're dealing with behaviors. We're dealing with kids that need help with learning how to act properly inside a classroom. So the admin, that is something, like I said, if I had the admin that I've heard about on your channel in public education, I would say it would be the quickest FU I could ever think of, because I got so many other things more important that are going on than having an adult breathing down my neck. I got kids cussing me out right now. I don't need this from you. And they understand that, because they know that getting a teacher into these buildings and staying is one of the hardest things that NPS deal with.
All right, so I have a controversial question.
All right.
Are women that succeed in that environment? Because I'm just like I like to put myself in every guest position and imagine how I would do. And I just wonder if it'd be really hard for a female teacher to do really well, especially middle school, high school.
I think female teachers probably do better. And the reason I say that is because there isn't this dynamic of quote unquote masculinity issue. So say you have a 12-year-old kid who sees you, I know for the audience they might not see this, but I got tattoos, and I got a beard, and I wear earrings, and I have this look to me where, yes, the kids can relate to me because I'm not this perfect looking person, which is helpful for me, but also it also goes against me too, where it's like, oh, you think you're tough? I'm gonna challenge you. And I think from the experience that I've had working with female teachers in this environment, they get to play that mom role that some of these kids are missing.
Hmm.
And these kids really, we have students throughout the campus that call this one staff member. She's a female, and she's great at her job. She connects to these kids on a deep level, and they all call her mom.
Aw.
And they call her that. She doesn't pronounce herself as that. They're the ones that, hey, mom, hey, come on, what, and they kind of, they're doing this in this loving way, but it's also profoundly deep, and it's kind of like, if you have a deep connection with these kids, they will never forget you because you're one of the few adults that stood by them rather than deserted them. So I do think there's the female staff at our school are amazing. They do an amazing job, and they are so protected by our students.
Hmm.
And that's the interesting thing. They're protected. Like, if there's a new student that comes into campus and they are dissing the female staff, or they're coming after the female teacher or whatever, they will get, I don't know, lack of a better word, stampede. Those kids will come after them so fast because they're so protective of people that care about them. And the female teachers there, they rise to that role, and they understand the importance of it. So I think it would be difficult for the female staff to know how vulgar our students can be. I think, when they're upset, they can be very vulgar, but they can also be profoundly loving. So it's this dichotomy that you're just like, I like it, but I don't like it. You know what I'm saying? And so it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see that population, female staff.
Well, I actually interviewed somebody else that I haven't posted yet, and they said the exact same thing. They are like a female teacher, and they worked in a really tough neighborhood, but they said exactly what you did. They said that the guys had it tougher because the guys are always trying to bow up to them and compete with them. So the fact that I've had two teachers say the exact same thing, I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
believe
And to touch on what you're saying is, I had to learn real quickly that I couldn't come from a masculine point of view when I was disciplining. And it's very odd. It's very strange. But if I came in with a tone, or if I came in with like you're disappointing me, or came in with this negative, like typical quote unquote masculine verbiage, I mean, they would destroy my classroom. They'd be like, F you, I'm going to destroy your classroom, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. So the only way I can relate to these kids is in a very compassionate, empathetic, calm, and stereotypical feminine energy, which it's very odd. It's very odd because my inclination is, well, they need a stern talking to. They need a stern this or that. And every time I've tried that approach, I mean, I've got, milk on my face type of thing. It's such a bad idea with these kids because they're so used to people being stern and authoritative with them, and this is my way or the highway type of thing, that if you come in that energy, all they think about is all the people that told them to be quiet, or don't do this, or you're terrible, or blah blah blah. So when you come in a empathetic way or a compassionate way, they're surprised, and they see you on a human level, and you can connect to them, and that's where you're able to have any influence. So that's been something I've learned the hard way of trying to be stern and think I'm the boss, so you're going to listen to me. Yeah, well, they showed me. So
So, do you see yourself ever transitioning to a more traditional schooling environment, or do you feel like you like this and you're finding your groove and you want to stay with this?
So it's a difficult question because I like this population, but what I talked about earlier as far as the financing of an NPS, that's my issue. I mean, a district is so much better funded, better benefits. They're tied into the California retirements, teachers retirement program. There's all these things that outweigh an NPS. That if I was to stay there for a career choice, I would really be affecting my future financially. And that's the issue. And that's kind of where I'm like, California needs to rectify this, realize that NPSs are a benefit to public education. But then again, if I think when I think about that, I'm like, imagine the public education mindset going into a school like this, it would be destroyed. The schools wouldn't make sense the way they are right now. And so maybe not. Yeah, now that I think about it. But the funding, I just think the funding, it has to be better. But I do think I don't know if I could do this for I worked in the NPS for 2 or 3 years. This is one of my first years as a full-time teacher. Normally I'm either substituting or a TA or doing, I don't have to deal with managing the classroom. So this has been the first year where I'm managing the classroom. And yeah, it's tough. It is tough. So I don't see myself doing this for more than another year or two. And the only reason I'm doing this, besides having these connections with these kids, is you can actually get paid what you deserve as a teacher in California starting out. I'll say if I had 10 years of experience, I'm not going to go to this school. Like that's the reality, because at 10 years you're making this money at a public school, blah 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 blah. NPS can't match it, blah blah blah. But if you start out as a teacher, which is what the NPSs rely on, is, oh, you only have 3 or 4 years of experience. You're on this scale step. You're only qualifying for this amount of money at a public school. We'll pay you a little bit more. And that's what you have to outweigh, where it's like, at the end of the day, I have bills to pay. I have people to feed. I got things to take care of. And it sucks that we're not allowed to think about that as teachers. We're not supposed to. It's for the kids, it's for the kids, it's for the kids. But at the end of the day, and this is what teachers are coming to now, is like, I have people to take care of. I have bills to pay. I'm trying to survive. And we need a system that supports that understanding. Yes, it's for the kids. Yes, I love doing this. And yes, I hate it some days. But if the pay was respectable, I can be okay with that. And that's the biggest conversation we're struggling to have in this environment right now. Is there are teachers in, I have somebody who lives in Idaho, and the teachers get paid. I mean, it's a lot. It's just sad. I look at, because I wanted to move there and be closer to these people. And I look at the pay and I go, what are they doing over there? I mean, they don't care about teachers at all. Like, that is not respectable what they're paying in Idaho or Nebraska or any other Midwest state, and it's not right. It's past time that somebody has stepped up and said, pay teachers equally well throughout the country. Do not make teachers drive to New York or California or Oregon to get paid a decent salary. Don't make that happen, because that's what's happening. And the more we do that, the more bubbles we live in, the more separation we have as a country, the more, I mean, it's just so frustrating.
Yeah, I totally agree. I worked my third year of teaching. I transitioned to a private school, and their offering pay was $28,000. And I had a master's degree in
Wow.
education. But it's crazy though. I hear like other teachers that could be getting $75,000. So yeah, you're totally right with like the swing. It's unimaginable. And it's so frustrating to hear a lot of political pundits actually say that teachers are overpaid because they're looking at maybe a few states. And it's like they have no idea that certain pockets of the US, it's like I could get more being a McDonald's supervisor than being a full-time teacher with a master's degree in certain schools. So that is true.
Yep. And to touch on your point, what I was talking about the NPS is, I have staff members that are barely making more money, because we're in California. So they want to raise the rate on minimum wage to all the fast food workers. So I have people that are barely making more money than someone working at McDonald's. And the stress and trauma and emotional abuse that they go through compared to someone flipping a burger and throwing stuff in for the fries, it's not right. And it's going to cause more problems, because now we're going to lose more people, and we're going to lose more people from education. We're going to lose good hearted people, because at the end of the day, when somebody is trying to survive, they're going to do what they need to do to survive. It doesn't matter about the kids. It doesn't matter. about having compassion or this. If they can't survive at a certain level, they will do what they need to do to survive. And that's what we're seeing with teachers. Teachers are saying, look, I'm going to go make more money being a Best Buy manager than I am, being a stressed out teacher to 35 kids, and I'm not going to think about it. And I'm just frustrated that I keep seeing these topics come up in the news the past year or two, and at the end of the day, it's like, yes, they're all touching on the topic that teachers need to be paid respectively across the board, but they're not forcing the issue. We need to force the issue. I mean, if teachers, I was like, if teachers all decided across this country to walk out tomorrow, the amount of damage we would do to the economy because of all the parents that would have to find a way to watch their kids is astronomical. We would shut the entire country down. They talk about the truckers union stopping trucking and all. If teachers did not show up to take care of these kids, the entire country would shut down, and we're being abused, and it's not right. And it's time every teacher in the nation realize we are stronger together and we need to stick together, and we need to bring this to the federal government and figure out what needs to be done to where this is a real topic that's being discussed.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. Well, I guess the final question that I'll ask is, what kind of advice would you have for somebody that's considering if they want to try teaching in an environment like you described? What do they need to consider? What does it take? What would you tell them?
I think if any teacher was considering going into this type of environment, one, you need a sense of humor because these kids are full of dark comedy. They will tell you jokes and make comments that are so off the wall that if you don't have a sense of humor, you will, you'll quit that first day. So you better have a sense of humor. Second is you better have a lot of patience. If you think you're going to come in here and teach these kids to the point where they're going to be, going to Harvard or Berkeley or whatever, you better adjust your expectations and accept the small wins. So those are two things that you will not survive in this environment without. I'm lucky that I have a dark sense of humor, so these kids don't surprise me. And I have a lot of leniency towards them, where it's like, I get it, but let's try to be appropriate, type of thing. But those two things are probably the most important if you're dealing with this environment. You definitely need a sense of humor. You need a lot of patience, and the third is probably just high expectations for those who deserve it. And I know that sounds wrong as a teacher to be like, well, I have different expectations for different students, but in this environment, you have to. If one kid I know doesn't care and it's going to destroy the classroom, that doesn't mean the kid that is trying to go back to public school, I have different expectations for them. That kid that's destroying the classroom, it's like, okay, well, that's his choice. He's making this choice and I'm going to accept it. But then the other kid who isn't doing that, but does another small thing, and you get on them and they go, wow, he did this and you're not doing it. Well, I'm sorry, dude, but I have different expectations for you because you've shown me you care. You've done things that show me you want to get out of here. So I'm going to hold you to those expectations. And that's really tough as a teacher to deal with kids on such an individual level, but it's so you have to with these kids. So you definitely have to have a sense of humor. You definitely need to have patience, and you definitely need to make sure that you're able to have flexible standards and not feel like it's a one size fits all.
That makes sense. One practical question I forgot to ask: do you always have other adults in the classroom with you, like teachers, aides, or backup? How does that part work?
Yeah, so every classroom has at least one teacher aide. Some classrooms have three, four, five, depending on what area they're in, you know. So for our classes that deal with more kids with emotional disturbances or behavioral issues, we tend to have at least one staff to two staffs. And yeah, you have to, because if a student pops off and wants to start fighting another student, you as a teacher, you're not, if they really want to fight each other, there's only so much you can do. So you need to have another staff in there to make sure that worst case scenario, you have to put a student in a restraint. At the end of the day, if they're going to grab a pencil and try to stab a kid, you have to stop them. So legally, you have to stop them, and for the sake of that kid too. So I have one staff member in mind. She's a female staff member. She has a great relationship with the kids. They all cherish her. I'm very lucky that she has such a great relationship with them, because that helps me as a teacher, because she's got my back. She's trying to help me out. I'm trying to help her out. The students understand that we're both there trying to help them. So gosh, it's so important to have good relationships in this type of job. I mean, it comes back down to just the human relationships. So yeah, it makes it very interesting.
And I also forgot to ask about the logistics of kind of like your program, because I know in one school we had something called BIST. So there was like think sheets, safe seats, buddy rooms. Do you guys have something like that? So let's say a kid's like freaking out. Do you have like another teacher escort them to like a partner room, or like what do you do?
Oh man, I wish. That sounds lovely. If a kid is freaking out, my job as a teacher is to get all the other kids out. Just go outside, get out of the classroom, get out of here. I'm gonna deal with this. And my classroom becomes the freak out room. So the other things that we do have, which are super helpful, is we do have therapy rooms. We have counselors and therapists on board. They're constantly interacting with our students. They're constantly roaming the campus, and kids escalated. Okay, there's a therapist, and they're trying to talk to them, and they're trying to build that human relationship, because at the end of the day, if you don't have a relationship with these kids, you got nothing. So those are the two elements we rely on. But no, we don't have any. If a kid decides to freak out, all the other kids kind of have to experience it. The only thing I'm able to do is, and I have to do it a lot, is, okay, this kid's having a bad behavior. I try to just have them go take a break outside, which is, outside is the safe area. It's like, go outside, just take a breather, relax, and you have to have these kids leave the classroom so much because of their behavior, because of other things going on in their lives. It impacts that academic portion of it, and it's really sucks. But tie it up to what I said earlier, was if a kid doesn't feel safe at home, if they don't have basic things met for them, they're not going to show up in a classroom and be willing to learn about these things that don't matter in their life at this moment. And I can't remember the educator that talked about that theory, but it's very similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's in the educational form, or educational way of putting it, which is kid needs food, water, safety, love, shelter, all these elements before they're going to sit there and listen to a teacher. So that's my advice to other educators. If you have a student that has so many bad behaviors, there's something going on in their life that is so beyond them, and it's not you as an educator. You can sit there and reprimand them. You can sit there and ridicule, or not ridicule, but you can sit there and just be trying to hit them over the head with a ruler type of thing. And it doesn't matter. Their home is their home life. There's something going on that is a red flag. So that's my warning to public education teachers out there. If a student has so many bad behaviors, and there's something just so they don't want to learn to a very deep core, make sure you're checking in on that kid. Make sure you understand what's going on at home, because I guarantee you it's something bad, something not good. There's something wrong there. Yeah.
Okay, so one more question. I know we've been going for over an hour here. I'm curious, has the stress and the cortisol and the intensity and just fight, flight, or freeze, has that affected you personally at all? Because I'm just kind of imagining what that would be like, and it sounds like it would be rough.
I'm lucky that I have a high tolerance, but there are days where, yep, my heart is pumping. I got stress going through my body, and I'm on flight or fight mode. Because I got a student that's, maybe they're upset at me, and maybe they're threatening me physically. And I did have one case where that happened. This goes back to me trying to be stern with them, and they were bullying another student, a student of mine, and I called him out, in a human way. I called them out. I said, you guys are being absolute bullies right now, and I'm not going to stand for it. And this kid that I had called out, he had grown up in a part of Southern California that has a lot of notorious gangs. There's a lot, like in the area that he grew up in, you're in a gang when you're 8 years old type of thing. I didn't know that. I knew he came from a rough neighborhood. I knew that, but I didn't know it to that extent. And that was me trying to be stern. And basically, he challenged me. He wanted to physically fight me. And you have to remember, this is a 14-year-old kid he's 1/3 or he's 2/3 my size, and 80 pounds lighter than me. And as a teacher, I'm responsible for teaching this kid, and now I'm put in the position of having to defend myself for safety. And it was the strangest moment. It was such a stressful, strange moment for me, where I had a kid pushing up on me, physically trying to intimidate me, knowing in my head I could totally fight this little kid if I needed to. But at the same time, you're in this weird dichotomy of, I'm a teacher and he's physically putting his hands on me and he's challenging me, and I'm having this fight or flight moment where I'm like, I don't know what to do. That was the weirdest moment I have ever experienced as an educator. I didn't know what to do, and I just froze. And he did that in front of other students, and there was one moment where I'm thinking, wow, I looked really weak. And two, from my perspective, is I was also very compassionate. The fact that I didn't react to that, I didn't have a physical reaction to him, because I was worried. I was worried a little bit that he was going to try and swing at me or physically try to hurt me. And he was big enough to the point where it would be something I have to deal with. He's not a little kid. He's a 14-year-old kid. He's strong. He's pretty strong for a 14-year-old, and he's pretty big for a 14-year-old. And yeah. So there are moments that happen every once in a while where you can just feel it, and it does get you a little bit. It does get you a little bit. But like I said, I'm lucky I have a higher tolerance for it, where a lot of stuff doesn't bother me. I'm so, like I said, I got calluses on all of my body. I got very thick skin. If a kid wants to cuss me out, I kind of just nod and smile and let them have their anger, and I don't worry too much about it. But yeah, the physicalness, when a kid wants to get physical with you in these environments, as an adult, it's very tough not to want to respond, to defend yourself. It's very difficult. And I know every adult in this environment deals with that. And thank God we all have patience, that we're able to take a smack in the head or take a push and where we don't respond in that kind of way. But it is very tough. And as soon as you find an adult in this environment that comes in and wants to be a part of that, and they can't take it, I mean, they're gone. They don't last a week. It's like a week there, and see you later. They quit because they can't take it. And that's fine. Not everybody's cut out for this environment. So yeah, it's tough.
Well, this has been super informative. I feel like I learned so much. I don't know if I would be tough enough to work in an environment like that, but my hat totally goes off to you and to anybody that's working in that environment, because it's needed. It's very necessary. And hopefully the funding situation gets figured out. And I don't know. Yeah. But thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. This has been really good.
Yeah, thanks, Trish. And I think you would do actually pretty well in the environment. They would all find you as the motherly figure, and I'm sure you would do great. But
Well, thank
it would be tough. It would be tough. It's tough for any teacher. But yeah,
Yeah,
thank
I'm
you.
kind of like sensitive, so I'm like, I'd probably like go home crying. Like as soon as kids roasted me, I'd be like,
I
so
know. I know. Yeah, no, it's tough, but yeah.
this has been so good. Audience, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, make sure to type them in the comment box. If you want to interview with me, make sure to email me at teachertherapytrish@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye for now, everybody.